Princess Zarathiel stood on the crystal balcony of her palace, watching the twin suns of Velthara set behind the floating mountains. Her silver skin shimmered in the dying light, and her 4 arms moved gracefully as she adjusted her ceremonial robes. Today marked the 3rd year since she married David Chen, the human ambassador who had arrived on her world through a diplomatic mission. The marriage had been a scandal among the royal court. Many of her advisors whispered that humans were a weak species, barely evolved beyond their primitive homeworld. They said David was soft, gentle, and completely unsuited for a warrior princess like herself. But Zara had seen something different in him during their first meeting. David entered the chamber quietly, carrying 2 cups of the sweet nectar tea they both enjoyed. His brown eyes crinkled with warmth as he smiled at her, and his black hair showed the first hints of silver at the temples. At 42, he moved with a calm confidence that never seemed to waver, no matter what challenges faced them. The council meeting didn't go well again, Zara said, accepting the tea with 2 of her hands, while her other 2 remained clasped behind her back. General Korthak is pushing harder for military action against the Vexani Empire. He thinks our peaceful approach shows weakness. David sipped his tea thoughtfully. What do you think? I think there's wisdom in avoiding war when possible, she replied. But my people expect strength from their rulers. They see you as my weakness, David. A soft human who can't even lift our ceremonial weapons. This was true. David stood only 6 feet tall, average for a human but small by Veltharian standards. Their people averaged 8 feet in height, with dense muscle and bone that could crush stone. Their culture celebrated physical prowess, and David's scholarly nature seemed alien to them. I've never minded what they think, David said, setting down his cup. I married you, not your people's opinions. Zara's heart warmed at his words, but worry still clouded her mind. The Vexani Empire had been expanding aggressively across their sector of space. 3 neighboring systems had already fallen to their massive war fleets. Intelligence reports suggested Velthara would be their next target. The next morning brought troubling news. Captain Thyrol burst into the royal chambers during breakfast, her 4 arms trembling with urgency. The tall, blue-skinned officer dropped to one knee before speaking. Your Highness, our outer sensor stations have detected a massive Vexani fleet approaching the system. They'll reach Velthara in 72 hours. Zara's blood ran cold. The Vexani were known for their brutality. They enslaved, conquered populations, and stripped worlds of their resources. No planet had ever successfully resisted them. How many ships? She asked. Over 300 vessels, Princess. Dreadnoughts. Battle cruisers. Fighter carriers. It's the largest invasion force they've ever assembled. David continued eating his breakfast calmly, though Zara noticed his jaw tighten slightly. What about diplomatic contact? He asked. Have they responded to any communication attempts? Captain Thyrol looked uncomfortable. They sent only one message, my lord. They demand complete surrender within 24 hours of their arrival, or they will reduce every city to ash. Impossible, Zara said, standing abruptly. Her ceremonial armor clinked as she paced. We have less than 50 ships capable of combat. Our ground forces number only 10,000 warriors. We can't resist an invasion of this magnitude. Then we evacuate, David said quietly. Get your people to safety. General Korthak chose that moment to stride into the chamber uninvited. The massive Veltharian warrior stood nearly 9 feet tall, his red skin marked with ritual battle scars. His 4 arms carried various weapons, and his voice boomed with authority. Evacuation is cowardice, he declared. We are Veltharians. We fight and die with honor, rather than flee like frightened children. And accomplish what? David asked, his voice still calm. Your people will be just as dead. But you'll feel better about it? Korthak's eyes blazed with fury. You dare speak of honor? Human? You who have never held a weapon in battle? You who cower behind our princess, while real warriors prepare for combat? Enough, Zara commanded, her own voice carrying the authority of generations of rulers. This arguing helps no one. We need solutions, not insults. But Korthak was too angry to stop. The solution is obvious, Princess. Cast aside this weak human, who softens your heart and poisons your judgment. Marry a true warrior who can stand beside you in battle. Someone worthy of the royal bloodline. The chamber fell silent. Even the guards by the door seemed to hold their breath. Zara's face darkened with rage. But before she could speak, David stood up slowly. General Korthak, he said, his voice still impossibly calm. I understand your frustration. You see your world threatened, and you want to fight back. That's admirable. But calling for my wife to abandon our marriage isn't a military strategy. It's just personal anger. Personal? Korthak laughed harshly. This is about the survival of our species. What can your weak human race possibly contribute to our defense? Your people haven't fought a real war in decades. You've grown soft and weak, content to hide behind treaties and diplomacy. David nodded thoughtfully. That's true. Humans have enjoyed a long period of peace. We've focused on science, art, philosophy. We've almost forgotten what we're capable of when threatened. Something in David's tone made Zara look at him more closely. There was a strange undertone to his words, something she'd never heard before. For just a moment, his brown eyes seemed to hold depths she'd never noticed. Exactly, Korthak continued. Your species has no warrior tradition, no understanding of true combat. Your scholars and merchants, nothing more. Also true, David agreed. We are scholars. We study things very thoroughly, including military history, tactical analysis, weapons development, and enemy psychology. We've studied war extensively, General. We just haven't practiced it recently. The room's atmosphere began to shift. David's words carried an odd weight, and his posture had changed subtly. He still looked calm and peaceful, but there was something else now, something that made the guards shift uncomfortably. Studies mean nothing against real violence, Korthak scoffed. When the Vexani come, they won't be impressed by your books and theories. No, David said softly. They won't be. Zara felt a chill run through her. Something was happening to her husband. Something she didn't understand. His voice remained gentle, but underneath it was something that made her ancient warrior instincts whisper warnings. We should focus on evacuation plans, she said quickly. Get the civilians to safety while we can. I agree, David said. But first, I should probably contact my ship. No, everyone stared at him. Your ship? Zara asked. The diplomatic vessel that brought you here left years ago. David smiled. And for the first time since she'd known him, the expression didn't reach his eyes. Not that ship, my dear. The other one. What other ship? General Korthak demanded. The one that's been in stealth orbit around your moon for the past 3 years, David said casually. Standard human diplomatic protocol. We always maintain a security presence when our people are stationed in foreign territory. The silence that followed was deafening. Captain Thyrol's mouth hung open. General Korthak's 4 hands had unconsciously moved to his weapons. Even Zara felt stunned. You've had a warship hidden in our system for 3 years? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Oh, not a warship, David corrected. Much smaller than that. Just a research vessel with some defensive capabilities. The TES Quiet Scholar. Nothing impressive by human standards. Why didn't you tell me? Zara demanded. David's expression softened as he looked at her. Because you never needed to know, my love. Earth's policy is to keep security measures discreet. We didn't want to make your people uncomfortable, or suggest we didn't trust them. But now you're telling us? Korthak growled suspiciously. Now circumstances have changed, David replied. The Vexani represent a clear threat, not just to Velthara, but to human interests in this sector. That changes everything. He walked to the chamber's communication console with steady, measured steps. Computer. Establish secure quantum communication with TES. Quiet Scholar. Authorization. Chen Delta. 77 Alpha. The console hummed to life, displaying symbols none of the Veltharians recognized. A voice answered in the human language, which David had taught Zara over their years together. Scholar here. Good to hear from you, Ambassador. We've been monitoring the approaching fleet. Status report, Commander Singh, David said, his tone suddenly crisp and professional. All systems nominal. Stealth integrity maintained. We've been conducting detailed scans of the Vexani force. Interesting fleet composition. They're using the standard intimidation approach, maximum visible firepower, with minimal tactical flexibility. Zara felt increasingly lost. This wasn't the gentle, scholarly man she'd married. This was someone else entirely. Someone who spoke of military matters with casual expertise. Assessment of local defensive capabilities? David asked. Brave, but insufficient. The Veltharians have good ships and fighters, but they're outnumbered 6-1. Standard defensive posture won't work against this size force. Agreed. Initiate contact with the Terran Defense Authority. We're going to need support. Already done, sir. Fleet elements are en route. ETA, 18 hours. General Korthak finally found his voice. Fleet elements? What kind of fleet? David turned back to face them. And Zara saw something in his eyes she'd never noticed before. It was ancient and deep and utterly without mercy. The kind that comes when you threaten human citizens, he said quietly. The kind that reminds the galaxy why Homo sapiens survived when stronger species didn't. The communication console crackled again. Ambassador, we're receiving a priority transmission from the approaching Vexani fleet. They're demanding to speak with local leadership. Put it through, David said. The main display activated, showing the bridge of a massive Vexani dreadnought. The creature on screen was horrifying, 12 feet tall, covered in natural armor plates, with multiple eyes and razor-sharp claws. When it spoke, its voice was like grinding metal. I am War Master Gorthak of the Vexani Empire. This system now belongs to us. You have 18 of your local time units to surrender unconditionally. Resist, and every living being on this world will suffer before they die. The transmission ended abruptly. The chamber remained silent for long moments. Finally, David spoke. Well, that was rude. Despite everything, Zara almost smiled. Even facing an impossible threat, her husband's dry humor remained intact. What do we do now? She asked. David looked at her with love, and something else. Something that made her realize she might not have known her husband as well as she thought. Now, my dear, he said softly, you get to see what humans are really like when someone threatens our family. The next several hours passed in a blur of activity that left Zara feeling like she was seeing her husband for the first time. David moved through the palace with quiet efficiency, coordinating with his ship, reviewing tactical data, and making decisions with an authority she'd never witnessed before. The Quiet Scholar has finished its detailed analysis of the Vexani fleet, he told her as they stood in the war room. Their formation suggests they expect minimal resistance. They're using an intimidation approach rather than optimal battle tactics. General Korthak studied the holographic display showing the approaching enemy ships. What difference does that make? They still outnumber us massively. It makes all the difference, David replied. Intimidation tactics work against species that think like the Vexani. They don't work against humans. Captain Thyrell looked up from her console. My lord, I'm receiving reports from our outer colonies. 3 settlements have gone dark in the past hour. The Vexani are destroying everything in their path. Zara felt her heart sink. Those settlements held thousands of her people. Are there any survivors? Unknown, Princess. Communication was cut off during the attacks. David's expression didn't change. But something in his posture grew very still. Commander Singh, he said into his communicator. Confirm those colony attacks. Connor. Confirmed, Ambassador. The Vexani are systematically destroying civilian targets. Standard terror tactics to break resistance before they arrive. Understood. What's our ETA on reinforcements? 14 hours until the first wave arrives. Full fleet deployment in 26 hours. Zara looked at David in confusion. Your reinforcements won't arrive until after the Vexani do. How does that help us? David was quiet for a moment, studying the tactical display. When he spoke, his voice carried a tone she'd never heard before. Cold, clinical, deadly. It doesn't help defend Velthara, he said. But it will help with what comes after. After? General Korthak demanded. There won't be an after if we lose the battle. We're not going to lose, David said with absolute certainty. But the Vex Ani just made a critical error. They attacked civilian targets. That changes everything. Before anyone could ask what he meant, alarms began blaring throughout the palace. Captain Thyrell's eyes widened as she read her displays. Princess. The Vex Ani fleet has accelerated their approach. They'll be here in 6 hours, not 72. Impossible, Korthak growled. Their ships can't move that fast. They can if they don't care about formation integrity, David said grimly. They're coming in fast and scattered, planning to overwhelm us with raw speed and firepower. Zara felt panic rising in her chest. 6 hours? We can't evacuate everyone in 6 hours. No, David agreed. We can't. He walked to the communication console and began entering commands. Computer. Establish priority channel to Tess, Quiet Scholar. Emergency authorization codes. The response came immediately. Scholar here, Ambassador. David's voice became utterly calm and professional. Commander Singh, I'm implementing Protocol Omega. Authorization, Chen Alpha, Black 7. There was a pause before the response came. I'm certain, Commander. The Vex Ani have attacked civilian targets. They've murdered non-combatants. Protocol Omega is authorized and active as of this moment. Understood, sir. All systems coming online. Beginning target acquisition. Zara stared at her husband in growing amazement. David, what's Protocol Omega? David turned to face her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her ancient warrior blood sing with recognition. This was what a true predator looked like. Protocol Omega, he said quietly, is what humans do when someone hurts innocent people. The main display suddenly activated, showing a view of space that made everyone in the room gasp. Where empty void had been moments before, a sleek vessel materialized, as if from thin air. It wasn't large by warship standards, perhaps 200 meters long, but it moved with fluid grace that seemed almost alive. Is that your research vessel? Captain Thyrell whispered. That's the Quiet Scholar, David confirmed. Human engineering at its finest. General Korthak studied the ship with a tactical eye. It's too small. One ship against 300? This is madness. Size isn't everything, General, David replied. Watch. The human ship began moving through space in patterns that defied everything the Veltharians understood about physics. It accelerated and decelerated instantly, turned at impossible angles, and seemed to phase in and out of existence. How is it moving like that? Zara asked in amazement. Quantum manipulation drives, David explained. We've been working on them for decades. The Quiet Scholar was our first successful test platform. On the display, the first Vexani scouts appeared at the edge of the system. Massive, crude-looking vessels that moved with brute force rather than elegance. They immediately began scanning for threats. The Quiet Scholar simply vanished. Where did it go? Korthak demanded. It's still there, David said. Just not in the same dimensional phase as the Vexani sensors. What happened next would be talked about in Veltharian military academies for generations. The first Vexani scout ship simply stopped. Its engines went dark, its weapons powered down, and it began drifting helplessly through space. Then the second scout ship suffered the same fate. Then the third. What's happening to them? Zara breathed. The scholar is introducing nanoscale disruptors into their computer systems, David explained casually. It's a precision operation. Disables all military systems while leaving life support intact. Within 30 minutes, 12 Vexani scout ships hung dead in space, their crews alive but completely helpless. General Korthak's 4 arms hung slack at his sides. 12 ships. Disabled without firing a shot. Humans prefer non-lethal solutions when possible, David said. But that's about to change. The main Vexani fleet had detected the fate of their scouts and were responding with typical brutality. Instead of investigating what had happened, they simply began firing their massive weapons at everything in the area, hoping to destroy whatever invisible threat was attacking them. One of their shots struck a disabled scout ship, vaporizing it and its crew instantly. David's expression grew very cold. Commander Singh, I saw it, sir. They just executed their own people. Change of protocols. Lethal force is now authorized. Copy that, Ambassador. Switching to active engagement mode. The quiet scholar reappeared on their sensors, but now it looked different. Weapon ports had opened along its hull, and energy readings were climbing rapidly. What followed was unlike any space battle in recorded history. The human ship moved through the Vexani fleet like a dancer through frozen statues. Its weapons fired with surgical precision, each shot disabling or destroying exactly what it intended to hit. Engines exploded, weapon systems overloaded, and entire ship sections simply ceased to exist. But the most terrifying thing was the efficiency. There was no wasted motion, no unnecessary destruction. Every action served a specific, tactical purpose. Impossible, General Korthak whispered. One ship can't fight an entire fleet. One human ship can, David corrected. We've had a long time to think about military technology, General. We've just never had a reason to use it. Within 2 hours, the Vexani fleet was in complete chaos. Nearly 50 ships had been destroyed or disabled, and the rest were fleeing in panic. But the human vessel pursued them relentlessly, picking them off one by one. Captain Thyrol looked up from her sensor readings in disbelief. Princess, the Vexani are requesting permission to surrender. Zara turned to David, but he was already shaking his head. No, surrender accepted. Not after they murdered civilians. David, she said softly. Surely mercy is appropriate now. They're beaten. Her husband looked at her with eyes that held depths of steel and ice. My love, there's something about humans you need to understand. We're not naturally violent. We prefer peace, cooperation, and diplomacy. But when someone crosses certain lines, he paused, watching as another Vexani warship exploded on the display. When someone hurts innocent people, especially children, something very old and very dark wakes up inside us. We call it righteous anger, and once it's awake, it doesn't stop until the threat is completely eliminated. The battle continued for another hour. The quiet scholar moved through the enemy fleet like an avenging angel, methodically destroying every ship that had participated in the attack on civilian colonies. The Vexani weapons couldn't even target the human vessel properly. It moved too fast, phased in and out of reality, and seemed to predict their actions before they made them. Finally, silence returned to the system. Of the 300 Vexani warships that had arrived, only a few dozen remained, and those were the ones that had tried to retreat from the beginning and hadn't fired on civilians. Commander Singh, David said into his communicator. All hostile targets neutralized, Ambassador. No human casualties. The quiet scholar took minor damage to secondary systems. But we're fully operational. DMN. DMN. Excellent work, Commander. Now comes the important part. Zara looked at her husband in confusion. Important part? The battle is over. David's smile was cold and terrible. The battle is over. But the message is just beginning. He activated the communication system and began broadcasting on all frequencies throughout the sector. This is Ambassador David Chen of the Terran Diplomatic Corps, speaking on behalf of the human race. Today, the Vexani Empire made a grave error. They attacked innocent civilians under the protection of the Terran sphere of influence. His voice carried across space to dozens of worlds, hundreds of species, thousands of ships. Let this serve as notice to all who would threaten innocent life. Humanity remembers. We remember every atrocity, every murdered child, every destroyed home, and we will respond. The transmission paused as David looked directly into the camera. The Vexani Empire no longer exists. Their military has been eliminated. Their worlds will be liberated. Their victims will be avenged. This is not a threat or a boast. This is simply what happens when you wake the sleeping giant. The transmission ended. General Korthak stared at David with a mixture of awe and terror. One ship did all of that? One ship, David confirmed. It's a research vessel with some defensive modifications. Then what would a real human warship be capable of? Zara whispered. David looked out at the stars. And for just a moment, she saw something that made her understand why the galaxy had been so quiet around human space. You'll find out when the fleet arrives, he said softly. They'll want to make sure this never happens again. The human fleet arrived exactly when David had predicted. And Zara finally understood why her husband had seemed so calm throughout the crisis. The ships that emerged from quantum space weren't just vessels of war. They were works of art that happened to be the most terrifying things she'd ever seen. 12 vessels materialized in perfect formation around Velthara. Each one different from the others, but sharing the same, flowing, organic design philosophy. They moved through space like living creatures, and their very presence seemed to bend reality around them. Mother of stars, Captain Thyril breathed, staring at her sensor readings. Princess, I can't get accurate readings on their capabilities. My instruments keep giving impossible results. David stood beside Zara on the observation deck, watching his people's ships take position. That's because they're using technology. Your sensors weren't designed to detect. Quantum computing, dimensional manipulation, consciousness-assisted targeting systems. Consciousness-assisted? General Korthak asked. He'd been unusually quiet since witnessing the destruction of the Vex-Ani fleet. The ships are partially sentient, David explained. Not fully alive, but aware enough to anticipate threats and react faster than any biological crew could manage. It's the only way to handle the computational requirements of multi-dimensional combat. A new voice came through the communication system, speaking in the melodic human language. David smiled as he recognized it. Admiral Chen, this is your sister Sarah, aboard the TDS Unbending Will. Permission to come aboard and check on my little brother? Zara's eyes widened. Your sister is the fleet admiral? The Chen family has a long tradition of service, David said mildly. Sarah chose the military path. I chose diplomacy. Within an hour, Admiral Sarah Chen materialized on the palace platform in a shower of golden light. She was taller than David, with the same dark hair but silver eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Her uniform was simple but elegant, and she moved with the fluid grace of someone comfortable with power. David, she said warmly, embracing her brother. When we received your Protocol Omega signal, the entire Admiralty wanted to come personally. You've caused quite a stir back home. The situation required it, David replied. Sarah, meet my wife, Princess Zara Thiel of Velthara. Sarah turned to Zara with a brilliant smile and bowed formally. Your Highness, it's an honor to finally meet you. David talks about you constantly in his reports. He writes reports about me? Zara asked, surprised. Oh yes, Sarah laughed. Very romantic reports. The analysis division thinks they're the most entertaining documents in the diplomatic archive. Despite everything that had happened, Zara found herself smiling. The family resemblance between the siblings was strong, and Sarah radiated the same calm confidence that had attracted her to David. Admiral, General Korthak interrupted. We need to discuss the strategic situation. The Vex-Ani Empire controlled dozens of systems. Their elimination will create a power vacuum that other species might try to fill. Sarah's expression grew serious. Already handled, General. We've dispatched liberation fleets to every former Vex-Ani territory. The enslaved populations are being freed, and transitional governments are being established. Within 6 months, all former Vex-Ani worlds will have self-governing status under Terran protection. Dozens of fleets? Zara asked in amazement. How many ships does humanity have? Brother and sister exchanged a look that was somehow both amused and sad. Princess, Sarah said gently. Humanity spans 14,000 star systems. We have a population of nearly 8 trillion people. The Terran Defense Authority maintains fleets in every sector of known space. Rope. Number 7. 1. One side. The numbers were staggering. Zara had thought humanity was a small, peaceful species confined to a handful of worlds. The reality was overwhelming. But why keep it secret? She demanded. Why let other species think you're weak? David took her hand in his. Because we learned something important during our early expansion into space. When species know how powerful you are, they react in one of 2 ways. They either try to destroy you out of fear, or they become dependent on you for protection. Neither approach leads to healthy relationships. So we developed a policy of strategic ambiguity. Sarah continued. We maintain diplomatic missions that emphasize our peaceful nature and scientific achievements. We keep our military capabilities classified. Most species think we're a minor power, with advanced technology, but limited resources. It allows for better relationships. David added. Species treat us as equals rather than either threats or saviors. We can trade, share knowledge, and build genuine friendships. Captain Thyrol looked up from her console. Admiral, I'm receiving reports from across the sector. Over 40 different species are requesting immediate diplomatic contact with humanity. They all want to. What's the human phrase? Get on your good side? Sarah sighed. And that's exactly what we were trying to avoid. David, this incident is going to change everything. The secret is out. I know, he replied quietly, but they crossed the line. They murdered children, Sarah. You know what that means to us. The Admiral's face hardened. Yes. It means we show them why humans survived when stronger species didn't. But it also means we'll have to rebuild our diplomatic relationships from scratch. Over the next few days, Zara watched in amazement as human efficiency transformed her corner of space. The refugee populations from the destroyed Vex-Ani colonies were relocated to new homes with resources and opportunities. Former slave worlds received immediate humanitarian aid and reconstruction support. But most importantly, she began to understand the true scope of human capability. Your people are everywhere, she said to David as they walked through the palace gardens. I'm receiving intelligence reports that show human influence in sectors we thought were completely independent. Not influence. David corrected. Presence. We have observers, researchers, and peacekeepers throughout known space. But we don't control anything outside our own territory. We just watch and help when we can. Like guardian angels, Zara mused. More like concerned neighbors, David smiled. We've seen what happens when advanced species become imperial. We decided early on that we didn't want to rule others. We just wanted to make sure no one else ruled through terror and oppression. They paused beside a fountain where the water danced in impossible patterns. A gift from the human fleet's engineers. David, there's something I need to ask you. Anything. Did you really love me, or was I just a diplomatic assignment? David stopped walking and turned to face her fully. His brown eyes were warm and completely sincere. Zara, my assignment was to establish diplomatic relations with your government. That took about 6 weeks. Everything after that was personal choice. But surely your government had opinions about the marriage. David laughed. Oh, they had many opinions. Most of them positive. Earth's foreign ministry thinks interspecies marriages are excellent for long-term diplomatic stability. But they left the decision entirely to me. And now? Now that everyone knows what humanity really is? Now, David said, taking her 4 hands in his 2, things will be more complicated. Other species will approach both of us differently. Some will try to use our marriage for political advantage. Others will see it as proof that humans can be trusted with power. And what do you think it proves? David considered the question seriously. I think it proves that love transcends species boundaries. That 2 very different people can build something beautiful together. And that sometimes the gentlest approach is actually the strongest. A communication chime interrupted them. Admiral Sarah's voice came through clearly. David, we need you in the command center. We're receiving a priority transmission from the Galactic Council. The Galactic Council was the closest thing to a universal government that existed in their part of space. It was a loose confederation of the most powerful species, and they rarely involved themselves in local conflicts. In the command center, the massive holographic display showed 12 different alien species in their council chambers. Zara recognized most of them. Ancient, powerful civilizations that had shaped galactic politics for millennia. The speaker was Chancellor Vorthak, a tall, ethereal being with crystalline skin and eyes like stars. His people, the Etherians, were considered the wisest and most peaceful species in known space. Ambassador Chen, the Chancellor, began. The Galactic Council has witnessed the recent events in this sector with great interest. We wish to formally invite humanity to join the Council as a voting member. In Eventer, the Chancellor began. David looked surprised. Chancellor, humanity appreciates the honor, but we've always preferred to remain neutral in galactic politics. Recent events suggest that neutrality may no longer be possible. Another council member interjected. Your response to the Vexani aggression has demonstrated capabilities that affect the balance of power throughout known space. Species across dozens of sectors are requesting human protection from various threats. Admiral Sarah stepped forward. Counselors, humanity has no desire to become a galactic police force. And yet, Chancellor Vorthak replied, your actions have already made you one. The elimination of the Vexani Empire has created a void that must be filled by someone. Would you prefer it to be filled by species less principled? The conversation continued for hours. Zara listened with growing understanding as the true scope of the situation became clear. Humanity had revealed itself as the single most powerful military force in known space. But they'd done so in defense of innocent life. That combination made them either the galaxy's greatest hope or its greatest threat, depending on perspective. Finally, David asked for time to consult with his government. The council agreed to wait for humanity's decision. What will you choose? Zara asked him later, as they stood on the palace balcony watching human ships patrol her system. That's not my decision to make, David replied. Earth's parliament will debate it for months. But I suspect they'll accept. Not because we want power, but because refusing might leave a vacuum that less ethical species would fill. And what about us? What about our life here? David smiled and pulled her close. That depends on what you want, my love. I can resign my diplomatic commission, and we can live quietly here, on Velthara. Or, you could come with me to Earth and see where I grew up. Or we could travel together, as humanity takes on its new responsibilities. Zara thought about everything she'd learned about her husband and his species. They were overwhelmingly powerful, but chose gentleness. They could conquer galaxies, but preferred to protect them. They were capable of terrible violence, but used it only when innocent life was threatened. I want to see Earth, she said finally. I want to understand the world that created people like you. Even though I'm not the harmless scholar you married? Zara laughed, remembering how wrong she'd been about him. David, You are exactly the person I married. Gentle, kind, scholarly, and peaceful. The fact that you're also capable of calling down the wrath of the universe when someone threatens innocent people, that just makes me love you more." As they stood together watching the stars, Zara reflected on the old Veltharian saying, "Still waters run deepest." She'd thought it was about hidden emotions or secret knowledge. Now she understood it was about power held in check by wisdom and compassion. Humanity had been still waters for centuries. But when the Vexani had threatened innocent life, those waters had shown their true depth, and the galaxy would never be the same. But perhaps, Zara thought as she watched human ships gently shepherding refugee vessels to safety, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. Protectors who were strong enough to face any threat, but wise enough to use that strength only when necessary. Her harmless human husband had turned out to be anything but harmless. And that, she realized with a smile, made him perfect for the challenges ahead.